Death Battle is a very important show to me, and like most shows out there, it is one that likes to make its finales big. When you end a season and go on break, you always want a good impact to be left after a season. You want someone to look back and go, that ended well. And if I'm going to look at most people's thoughts on any series, you'll find that a finale can often dictate how people feel. How many times have you heard someone say the show was good, but the finale was bad, or even the finale ruined it? It's quite common out there. Of course, you also want a good premiere, which is not what I'm rating today, because my good friend Biffweed over on his channel is also doing that. Oh hey, he can do that too. And I'm going to of course leave a link in the description to his channel and to his video, because I'm nice like that, and you guys have been great hopping over from my channel to Biffweed's, giving him a lot of attention and love. He makes great content, and I'm very glad that he's been doing really well in the last few months. Anyway, which of these Death Battle finales are the best? Which are its worst? Well, today I'm going to be ranking these 7 episodes based on my opinion. Opinion. Keep in mind, you've been on the internet. If you have an issue with the word opinion, I'd recommend growing up. Ooh, that's a bit nasty. I'm going to keep that in though.
So you watching any anime?
Before I explain to you why I have Thanos vs Darkseid ranked underneath a certain other episode, I want to put you in my shoes before watching this episode. There I was, a little nemesis, not that little, loving Death Battle, and I was wondering, man, what's the finale of the 5th season gonna be? And then I see this, the reveal that it's Thanos vs Darkseid, one of the Marvel vs DC Legacy matches I want the most. A battle on such a grand cosmic scale that even now, 2 seasons later, not a single combatant in the series' history has even begun to approach what these two are capable of. The only outerversal character battle I actually like, because them being outerversal is such a small part of the conversation. Because it's all about, well, Thanos has arguably more power than Trueform Darkseid, but then Trueform Darkseid is able to avoid that power because of the way he exists. It's great how so many things mesh well to make this an interesting outerversal battle, as opposed to like Lucifer versus Beyonder, where it's like, you know, Beyonder's strong, but then Lucifer literally blinks him out of existence. It's a battle between 2 of my favorite antagonists in all of Marvel and DC, easily in my top 5 antagonists from either series, and even in my top 10 of all time from both. Thanos. One of the most threatening and prevalent Marvel comic villains, only really outmatched by Doctor Doom and Magneto in his presence. And Darkseid, a villain that is carried solely by his aura. Not a villain that's interesting, layered, redeemable, or a villain with a point to make. He's purely carried by the sheer intimidation and presence he has. When Darkseid shows up, that's when we're no longer hanging around with Arm Fall Off Boy or in the adventures of Wally the God Kid. We're in the big boy zone. Though some people scale Wally the God Kid above Darkseid, but I don't want to talk about that. I'm so hyped for this. I'm making a freaking prediction video before Season 7, which I almost never did at that point. I was confident that my man Darkseid would take the win as he should. And this will be the fight to finally topple everything else and be my favorite. And then it comes out. The analysis is composed of several MCU jokes, an annoying unnecessary Deadpool cameo, consistently comparing Trueform Darkseid's powers to Universal, while also saying it threatens all of creation, and also saying all of creation was a multiverse, thus confusing people who don't have a bias to where they put Darkseid's power, and never really touches on how strong the Infinity Gauntlet is. In fact, the analysis literally doesn't even say what it can do. Oh sure, they say it controls all the aspects that stones do, and that it doesn't work in another universe, but no comment is made on its power. Sure, the Reality Stone can manipulate all reality, but you haven't said how Thanos uses that power. 2 characters can have the same ability, for instance, Natsu Dragneel and Porcus D. Ace. Inherently, their abilities are primarily the same, just one becomes fire and one eats fire, but aside from that, they're the same character and ability, but they use their powers differently. So you want to comment on how a character uses their power, but literally all they say is, it controls these aspects. MCU reference snapped away half the universe. And that's it. The analysis is painfully unfunny, by far one of the least funny Death Battle analyses they've ever done. Fuck, there's an actual Nomad of Nowhere cameo in this. Anyone who doesn't watch that show, which is a lot of people given it didn't even make it to a 2nd season yet, and hell, I haven't even watched Nomad of Nowhere, so I was fucking confused, will be fucking confused. He comes out of nowhere, it isn't funny, it's literally just, hey, he can do this thing like this other character who you don't know. That'd be like if for Thanos they said Thanos can attack people through time, like the Black King from Chapter 8 of Chain Chronicle. Though at least then they'd be touching what Thanos can actually do with the fucking thing. It's painful. Sometimes, watching this analysis legitimately hurts. What was the point of all these pointless references? Why do you need a Drax reference in the middle or at the start of your Darkseid analysis? It's not funny just because it's Drax. I love Drax. He's one of my favorite MCU characters, but he didn't need to be here. You could have left it with, oh no, not David Bautista Drax. And that's it, but no, you had to go even further and include a bit of a clip. It's pointless. And once again, they don't even make a comment on what the Gauntlet can do, and or more importantly, how Thanos uses its abilities. And once again, with Darkseid, someone watching this who is not biased to universal or multiversal Darkseid is going to be confused, because they always compare his powers to a universal level threat. He's always like, oh, it compares to this force, which can nullify Universe Bomb, and it can overpower Superman, who also can tank a Big Bang. But then they earlier say that all of creation is a multiverse, and say that True Form Darkseid threatens all of creation, while also constantly comparing it to universe-level threats, which they also compare the Darkseid Avatar to. It's so confusing to any, because they're not clear on things. But then there's the animation, and there's nothing. I feel nothing. But disappointment, I guess. It starts and ends with an annoying Deadpool cameo. Why is he here? He doesn't need to be here. This is pointless. It's unfunny. Thanos fucking obliterates him, even though they already said Thanos made him immortal so he couldn't die and go with death. Here he is killing him. Sure, maybe Deadpool is alive because the Gauntlet is changing him into confetti while keeping him alive, but oh, they didn't bring up that Thanos could do that. So anyone who doesn't know prior that Thanos can turn people into confetti and keep them alive at the same time is gonna be confused. That is, if they paid attention to the analysis. Otherwise, they might just think, oh yeah, Thanos killing Deadpool, allowing Deadpool to get together with Death, that's something he'd do. But then there's the rest of the fight, which really peaks at the beginning. Darkseid headbutting the Gauntlet is pretty great, and Thanos warping space and reality with Darkseid not giving a shit is cool too. It works really well to show how strong they are by having them throwing around buildings and no-selling it. Then Thanos gets hurt by a car and they destroy the Thanos copter. Then it goes downhill. Darkseid fires his Omega Beam for the first time, the attack that's famously impossible to dodge, and it misses completely. It's not even clear where he's aiming because we see it moving away from Thanos at the end of the shot, and then they're just gone. We don't see them fade away, it's just the next shot they did not put them into the animation. Admittedly, the second and last time they're used by a Darkseid avatar is pretty alright, but then suddenly it goes celestial. No build-up or pacing, it jumps from cars and buildings to weaponizing the solar system. I at least would have expected something like Thanos picking up and hitting Darkseid with an entire continent. But there's also a real scale and jank issue. Something about this shot, how it cuts to this other shot with no transition, feels weird. Like, we don't see Darkseid here, the planet is clearly spinning quite fast with a few effects laid on the screen, but then it smash cuts to this flat shot of Darkseid, suddenly being the size of a fucking moon, suddenly being in a position where he wasn't before because we would have seen him, and the planet's no longer spinning, but then we see him flying through other planets, and the first one is nowhere to be seen. So was it really not that big? This looks like a planet, but did they mean for it to just be a really large meteor? Because it doesn't look like a meteor. We don't see the planet. We don't even see Darkseid, who is as big as that planet. Thanos creates a black hole, which is cool, I guess, and seeing Darkseid just walk out and crush it is also cool. But then Thanos rushes at him with what definitely is not our solar system. We get a giant people fight with no impact due to bad sound design and rather odd animation. Then they clash a fist, this random nonsense happens, and before we get to the ending, let's talk about what just happened. This is a rubbish sequence that lacks any impact. Thanos does all the fighting for most of it, but the exploding planets and detonating star have less impact than Worldbreaker Hulk smashing Doomsday into the floor. It all happens so quickly, there's no real time to drink in what's happening. This episode has scale, but lacks impact. To go back to the comparison I just made, it's the opposite of Hulk vs. Doomsday, which has impact but lacks scale. And I prefer things when they have impact than when they're just big and don't feel impactful. I would rather something feel big than look big, if you get my drift. And Thanos vs. Darkseid fails to me. Still, a good ending could have saved it. I guess, like I said, an ending can change how you see something. But then the ending comes along and it goes further down shit creek. The paddle has sunk. Thanos at this point does nothing but snap his fingers and shoot eye beams once. He snaps away a bunch of avatars, and really we only needed him to do it just once. He only needed to snap one away. But he has so many methods of how to deal with avatars with his reality gem. But just because the MCU emphasizes the snap, he only does the snap. He politely walks into the sphere of the gods, and then Darkseid, who looks like the comic but also moves around, which looks really shithouse, is just sitting there. Thanos goes for his eye beams, Darkseid Omega sections him, and the battle ends with Thanos in a place where literally any death is possible. It is the most potential for a death in the series. It could be the most painful, the most badass, the most depressing, but what we get is him standing in a white void, no background, nothing. And then Deadpool is there, shooting Thanos with a gun, leaving no mark at all, and that's it. He falls over like he's fucking Texas in Red vs. Blue. It even ends with Deadpool saying something obnoxious, unfunny, and annoying. So not only do I think what we got was rubbish, but I also think it really failed to utilize the character's strengths. Darkseid didn't teleport at all, they didn't engage in a fistfight until right at the end, despite how cool a proper fistfight between them could have been. He doesn't try to turn anybody to stone, absorb energy, create barriers, raise an army of the dead, paralyze Thanos, break dimensions by punching them, freeze time, create illusions, control the weather, summon anything from Apocalypse, manipulate gravity, create a mass singularity, and Thanos, he doesn't try to mind control Darkseid only for Darkseid to laugh at him within his own head and block him out. He doesn't manipulate molecules, he doesn't use his cloaking device, try to age Darkseid's avatar, blow one up from the inside, trap any in the soul gem, turn an avatar into glass or rubber, create clones of himself, or even use more than 2 gems. Throughout the fight, he uses the space and reality gem, but he doesn't really try any mental attacks with this mind gem. He doesn't try soul gem BFR. He doesn't use the time gem to manipulate time. And we really don't see him do anything with the power gem except throw Darkseid through the street. Something he's more than capable of doing 5,000 times over without the gem. With all these two can do, all Thanos does is create portals, warp a city, explode a building, make a shield, telekinesis, grow big, and snap his finger. But all Darkseid does is fire his Omega Beams 3 times, use his telekinesis, and grow larger. Darkseid spends almost all of the fight just standing there getting hit, when we could have easily gotten a really cool fight where they actually throw down for a bit and use their limbs to smack each other. But no, we didn't. So much missed potential, possibly even more missed potential than Doctor Strange vs. Dr. Fate. Obviously, I don't expect them to include everything, that would be a bit much, but I expect them to include more than this, and for the love of Primus, the ones you do use should probably be used better than Deadpool with a gun. The reason this episode ranks below that other episode is simple. I had more expectations for this one, and it failed greatly. It lacks anything that makes me want to come back, and of all the finales, it's the most disappointing. And yeah, the other one was not originally meant to be a finale. And if it wasn't the finale, then it definitely wouldn't have as much hate as it does. If that other episode was not the finale, no one would really complain about it beyond saying it was a waste of time, as opposed to it was shit. We were meant to get Megazord vs. Voltron, but they couldn't do it in time. This one was intended as a finale. They meant Thanos vs. Darkseid for the finale from the start, and it still failed. An unprecedented disappointment that I don't want to talk about any longer.
Oh my god, it's Deadpool with a gun!
And of course, despite what I just said, yeah, Deadpool vs. Pinkie Pie is down the bottom too. And between it and Thanos vs. Darkseid, I do have trouble choosing between them, but Deadpool vs. Pinkie Pie is suboptimal. The analysis is similarly unfunny. Deadpool interacting with the host was only funny in Deadpool vs. Deathstroke. Hell, in Deadpool vs. The Mask, the analysis was carried by Wiz and Boomstick, not Deadpool. Deadpool didn't need to be there. And Pinkie Pie is fine. I do like Wiz having a mental breakdown over Toon Force. It is kinda odd that Pinkie Pie's segment is 6 minutes long while Deadpool's is under 5. But the thing with the animation is, it's not bad at the start. There's actually some fourth wall breaking stuff I like, such as Pinkie Pie and Deadpool fighting over the split screen, Deadpool using the like bar as a like saber, and Pinkie Pie blocking his attack with a pop-up ad, and then it just goes south. The ending is really disappointing and didn't really make me laugh at all. I like the idea of the two popping up in old episodes, but they only did 3, and one of them is Amy versus Ramona, wherein they do not even interact with anything. Pinkie Pie just comments on what happened, as opposed to the last 2 where she actually got involved. And then it's just over. There's just really not much to talk about. You already know the issues. Is it a better episode than Thanos vs. Darkseid normally? I don't know. And as a finale, it's worse. However, the thing is that this was not meant to be a finale, but Thanos vs. Darkseid was. If you really are annoyed with how I rank these bottom 2 though, I do flip-flop on this. Sometimes Deadpool vs. Pinkie Pie is worse, sometimes I think Thanos vs. Darkseid is worse. It depends on my mood, but fuck it, stop typing up an angry comment and let me talk about episodes I like now. Here's the thing, plain and simple, to be as blunt as possible. If Deadpool vs. Pinkie Pie was planned as the finale from the start, and it was the one they intended to be to have end season 3 from the beginning, it would be below Thanos vs. Darkseid. However, because it was there as a victim of circumstance, I'm going a bit lenient on it. How many people do you think will be talking about how this was a negative video when the rest of it is going to be me talking about things I like?
He would already be 30 times more powerful than World Breaker Hulk.
Hulk vs. Broly is an episode I already spent 20 minutes talking about recently, so I'll make this brief. It's a good episode, not one I love. It has higher quantity of issues, but higher quality of good things. It's good, but not great. The end. Virgil vs. Sephiroth is pretty incredible. For a match I really like using two characters I fucking love to no end, I'm glad it delivered. Now I know what some people are probably saying immediately. You were talking about how bad it was that they said Darkseid is universal. I'm too ignorant to realize that the point was that they said things that could confuse someone as they contradict each other. And people who go in looking for reasons to believe multiversal Darkseid was used will believe it, but people who don't go in believing that they will use multiversal Darkseid will be confused. They won't go with it. Legitimately, there are people who say that they used multi-plus Darkseid, but like, they didn't. They kept comparing him to Universal, and they said Thanos couldn't deal with Universal. The only thing that would make Darkseid multiversal, based on their analysis, is saying they said he threatened all creation, which they said was a multiverse, but then the phrase threatened all creation can apply to just a universe anyway. Shouldn't you be annoyed by Sephiroth and Virgil downplay? I mean, I am annoyed, but not because of the downplay itself. Death Battle's writing often focuses more on feats for the casual audience. Casuals would not accept Universal Virgil or Galaxy-level Sephiroth. It's just those things where, like, people aren't going to agree, so why bother? Why bother? So even though saying Virgil is faster but Sephiroth is stronger is very wrong, as long as the verdict is agreed upon by most of the versus debating community and casual crowd, that's what matters for the writers. Research is a very subjective thing. People are going to buy different things, people are going to accept different calcs, people are going to accept different scaling. So saying this episode had bad research, even though it, in this case, is pretty true, it's not a criticism I want to make, because of course I don't know everything either. There could be plenty of reasons to believe that all of the scaling for these two above what they gave is wrong. I have not seen them, I don't believe them, and while I accept highest scaling for both, I'm not gonna bother with that. My issues, however, come from the statement that Sephiroth's sword cut is worth 30 Hiroshima bombs, which, fun fact, is objectively untrue. What they've done here is convert newtons of force to tons of force, and then convert tons of force to tons of TNT. And that's the mistake they make. 1 ton of force does not equate to a ton of TNT. 3 billion newtons of force is 337,213.41 ton forces. However, it is also only equivalent to 0.72 tons of TNT. These are different measurements who just use ton in a different way. The Hiroshima bomb was worth 15,000 tons of TNT. If you were to assume these 15 kiloton wield was in ton forces, which it's not, then yes, you could say Sephiroth is 22 times stronger. But actually, 15 kilotons of TNT is equivalent to 7,054,504,634.48 ton forces, so yeah, a bit of an oopsie. I understand where they did it, they confused tons of force with tons of TNT. It's a minor issue compared to how good the rest is. The analysis is fun, entertaining, and detailed enough. The conclusion is well put together. The explanation of Supernova is actually one of the more interesting bits of Death Battle analysis, where they use various bits of evidence to elaborate on why an ability is as it is. You don't get that often where they talk about, where they explain a power in great detail, but I'm glad they did here. The animation is also incredible. I don't like how fat Virgil's model is, that's my only real complaint. But there's a lot of incredibly fast-paced and well-choreographed sword fighting mixed in with a fun usage of their various powers and showing those bounce off each other. And while it's great at the start, things really kick up when Devil Trigger comes out. The scene of Virgil fighting off all the clones and busting out the sword ring is amazing. I love how dynamic and free-flowing this all is. When Sephiroth busts out Supernova, it's the best I've been on this beach the whole time scene in the series. Seph's reveal of the Supernova and Virgil's absolute shock is fantastic. They replicate the animation of the original Final Fantasy VII, even making sure to have Virgil's health at maximum to represent his incredible healing factor. And Virgil doesn't go down like a bitch. He gets an amazing final hurrah, where literally in the center of a supernova, he grabs Yamato and cuts his way out of the dimension before Sephiroth kills him. It's great. The voice acting is good, though Virgil's voice doesn't have the amount of rasp I expect, but Cameron Nicard blows it out of the water with Sephiroth. And right after the fight, we get a pretty fun conclusion. We get a number for Zack, scaling that most casuals would be fine with, and an explanation of how their regeneration compares, how Sephiroth's illusions would be effective on Virgil, and of course bringing in Supernova. Overall, it's a great episode, with some fantastic choreography helped by some great sound design for the swords, and utilizing pretty much all of Virgil's arsenal against the most notable and important of Sephiroth's in a way that feels fulfilling and exciting. And the progression of the fight makes sense as well. They clash blades, Virgil decides to utilize his speed for an advantage, Sephiroth creates illusions to give him time to heal, Virgil uses Devil Trigger to fight them all off, slowly going from Devil Trigger on its own to the sword ring to just going ham on everything. Seph reveals his big attack, Virgil cuts out, and then he dies. Everything makes sense and flows naturally into the next scene. A great episode, through and through.
I would almost rather have Asura versus Might Guy.
In the years since it first came out, I've come to really appreciate All Might vs. Might Guy, and it all starts with that analysis. All Might vs. Might Guy has one of my favorite analysis portions of any episode. All Might's analysis does a great job going through his important smashes to leading into the United States of Smash, going into some feats, his weaknesses, and leading the weaknesses into the end of the analysis. I really like how the analysis flows in a similar way to All Might's own story. It starts small, then shows off All Might's power to everyone, and then goes to All Might's weaknesses and his crippling into the end of All Might's story. Similar to how All Might started small, showed off his power to the world, then got injured, crippled, and that was the end. It ends on a heartfelt note about his successor and what his successor stands for. And the best thing is that Might Guy's own analysis mirrors All Might, with the same small beginning based on what Might Guy lacked and how he overcame it, his feats of power, his 8 gates, and slowly escalating in power with how they show all the gates. Literally the only gates they skip in this analysis are the 3rd and 5th. They talk about the first 2, the 4th, the 6th with a speed calc, 7th with a feat, and then finally going to the 8th gate and its power. Then its detriments, how those detriments would affect him and how they did affect him, and then finally the same heartfelt note about his successor. So the first half of the video is superb. How good is the second half? It's also superb! The animation has some problems, notably the frame rate is a bit choppy, which does bother me at points, but this is outweighed by everything. The way the fight starts is amazing. The two mights are so jovial, happy, and inspiring the entire fight. They give off a sense of camaraderie and instant friendship that no other death battle can really claim to have. The way it escalates into a full-on fight from an arm wrestle feels so natural, with the two jumping into a friendly spar over time. And every blow that is meant to have impact has impact. I get a bigger feeling of impact from All Might's Texas Smash than planets blowing up in Hulk vs. Broly, simply due to the quality of the animation and the emphasis on its power and good sound design. And when they get to fighting in close quarters, the fight has some fantastic character animation. And by character animation, I mean how the animation can express a character's personality and how two individuals differ without having to say anything. All Might as a character is focused on his raw power above all things, while Might Guy is focused on his skill and technique in physical combat above all things. It's often associated that Might Guy and Rock Lee are primarily just really physically strong, but it is important to note that they fight with incredible technique and skill to overcome their flaws. Might Guy in this fight has the combat and technique and skill of a seasoned martial artist, while All Might is far more sluggish and hard-hitting. All Might's punches feel as if he's putting everything into them, while Might Guy feels like he's trying to wear All Might down with his technique and skill, and I'm a sucker for a good breakdance kick. And hey, this all works for Might Guy. He does wear All Might down enough to open him up for a big hit. Additionally, the idea of All Might just allowing Guy to access his higher forms is completely believable in the context of the battle. All Might wants to see what Might Guy is capable of, so Guy is showing him. And when he does, it's awesome. The effects and animation for Might's gates is amazing. Might Guy remains in the 6th gate for 20 seconds, which, fun fact, is longer than Lee spent in the 5th and 6th gate combined. And it has more impact than the 7th gate too, though I guess that's not saying much when the 7th gate did one hit that was no solder. Anyway, we get to see Might Guy using his 6th gate to start focusing on power over technique, and the best thing is, you see that it doesn't work all that well. All Might is more powerful than all of the gates prior to the 8th, so when Might Guy tries to focus on his power over technique, All Might begins to turn the tide. It's a good detail, a bit of character animation that really fits. And there's a fucking awesome range battle, which is something I'm sure nobody expected from this episode. All Might rapid punching the air to launch gusts of wind to counter Might Guy punching so far he's igniting the air is a cool concept, and for as short a scene as it is, I really love it. Not so much a fan of All Might straight up catching the Hirudora, which is literally a gust of wind, but here, you get that. He unleashes an amazing United States of Smash. And then, you kick into the guitar riff as Might Guy opens his 8th gate. And we get what is one of my favorite builds up to a death ever. The two charge at full power, the music is amping up, All Might screaming the mantra of UA high into the air as he goes for the biggest punch he can muster, and then the death kind of disappointed me. Legitimately, this episode would have a good chance of moving up in the rankings if the death was better, because this small explosion doesn't really do it for me, and it disappoints me that All Might didn't land that punch. Go beyond plus ultra, but not plus ultra enough to actually hit with what you're going beyond with. What I would have preferred, and I understand if you disagree, is a recreation of the night guy scene from the actual series, though I guess more so the one from Naruto Storm 4, as that's the only footage I can show for copyright reasons. Have the two collide their attacks. All Might lands a punch at the same time Might Guy lands a kick. The two blows clash, but the sheer force of Might Guy's pushes All Might back. It drags him through the forest at full speed. The force explodes him into the air, where the sheer impact of that final explosion. Combine All Might changing the weather with Might Guy warping space with his power, and make a huge impact. You want a big impact. Change the weather and warp space at the same time. And then they're done. They fall from the clouds to the ground. All Might says a final line about how inspiring and oppressive Might Guy was as he falls to his death. He has no energy left to save himself. And Might Guy falls beside him. They both crash, but Might Guy has a moment before he dies to say what he did in the episode. That it was a good fight. They need to do it again. Seconds after All Might has died, Might Guy follows him, and the final shot is of their two bodies laying opposite each other, dead. As it is, I don't mind the ending, but I would have preferred what I imagined in my head. A big impact. You want to combine the sheer force the two have. You want dragging across the ground. You want that big space warping, weather changing smash. You can have it end in the clouds with that huge sort of explosion. Maybe not just an explosion though, but have that warp space and cause rain. So when the two are falling, the final shot can be given that right atmosphere with a nice dark rain cloud over the top. Really sell the sadness of the scene. I don't hate the episode's ending, but I wish it was better. But then the conclusion is great. It multiplies All Might's power for the sake of argument, shows off Guy's better technique and skill, and then shows off all the differences in sheer power between All Might and the 8th gate. I also like how they show off the difference in petatons and gigatons, so people who don't know the difference between the units can understand. Which is something that like they said they stopped wanting to use tons of TNT calcs because casuals don't understand the difference. It's like, shut the fuck up. You've already explained it in the past, you can just explain it with the episodes. There's a love that permeates for this episode. A love for the characters, for the series, for the matchup. It's an incredible episode, leagues and bounds beyond most of the series, with immense passion in every single corner. The research, analysis, conclusion, animation, the voice acting, the sound design, the choreography, the editing. Everything was top notch, of a level of quality where, when it comes to improving it, it would be genuinely difficult. I feel bad for having only given it an 8 out of 10 when I did my Season 6 retrospective, because this episode deserves nothing short of a complete 9 out of 10. Yeah, honestly, those issues, namely with the death, do hold it back for me in that regard, but still, it's a good episode. It might not get that 10 for me, but by God, it's still a great episode. Oh, and Mighty fucking slaps. It is literally the best track on this list. And no, it was not beaten out by Akari for me.
Beyblade, Beyblade, let it rip!
Pokemon vs Digimon is an episode I've had an incredibly hard time writing up my reasons for ranking so high. Not because I don't have my reasons, but because putting them into words has delayed this video's production. As such, I'm not going to be terribly thorough with this to save time. I don't want to spend another several days thinking about how to write this. Animation is good, there's escalation which is great, Mega Charizard's transformation is incredible, and the Mega Charizard vs Walgreymon fight set to Uncontrollable from Xenoblade is amazing. I like the death, the voice acting is good, the analysis segments are decent, but the conclusion isn't great and the slave line is cringe. That's all I got.
It's over! It's finally over! We never have to hear about it again!
Indeed.
Goku vs Superman is something else. Separated from the controversy, the bad calcs, the lowballing, the gravity formula, there's something special about Goku vs Superman that no episode can really make a claim to. To me, this is the only episode that pushed itself as being something special, as being more than just any other episode. Let's be real, you could move any other finale into the middle of a season, and if that's how it was from the start, you would never have guessed that they were meant to be finales, even when they were incredible. there are often episodes better than them or equal to them in their own season. Iron Man vs Lex Luthor could have swapped places with Pokemon vs Digimon, nobody would have blinked an eye. Hulk vs Doomsday could have swapped places with Deadpool vs Pinkie Pie, everyone would have cheered. As good as All Might vs My Guy or even Pokemon vs Digimon are, they don't feel like anything special in the grand scheme of Death Battle. They're great episodes, don't get me wrong, but the format, the presentation, the length, they really don't push themselves to try to make themselves feel like episodes that stand out in the crowd. If you watch Death Battle with no knowledge of the season list and just watch from the beginning to the end, those finales wouldn't feel terribly interesting. You'd just be like, that was a good episode, and then move on. But this episode is different. Goku vs Superman is the one episode that if you were to binge all of Death Battle with no knowledge of when the seasons began or ended, you would know that Goku vs Superman was a finale. From the moment this episode starts, the atmosphere is different. The first actual custom track in Death Battle plays, Goku vs Superman by the Synthetic Orchestra. They don't just leave the intro at name dropping them after seeing what's similar. They explicitly make clear they're going through everything. They explain what Superman they're using, and they lead into the unique opening credits. It feels like an episode that's bigger than all the others. Goku vs Superman is an event. This isn't just any random episode. This isn't Hulk vs Broly. This isn't Virgil vs Sephiroth. This isn't even Thanos vs Darkseid. This is Goku vs Superman. Both characters have incredible analysis segments. The music from their respective adaptations fits perfectly, and the writing is incredible. Everything flows so well into the next part, and they're incredibly thorough. Not in the all stats are calculated and incredibly well detailed, but rather that they go through the effort of explicitly explaining certain elements. They go out of their way to say power levels are needless, instead of just having some box in the corner say it. They explicitly explain what ki is, they reference quotes, they explain how it's different to magic, they talk about the characters, they go into specifics, they show full-length clips from the characters' sources as well, something that doesn't happen nearly as often nowadays. But then there's the animation, the longest animation yet, and in my opinion, one of the best in the entire show's history. One of the best animations I've ever seen from any Versus series on the internet. Sure, it starts with a weird opening skit that's weird. To anyone who isn't a Dragon Ball Z Abridged fan, it's awkward. I remember when I first watched this episode, there was someone who was watching it with me who didn't know what Dragon Ball Z Abridged was, but was a fan of regular Dragon Ball Z, and he didn't like how Goku was portrayed. But then the fight starts and everything falls perfectly into place. In my opinion, this is the only Death Battle to truly capture that Dragon Ball Z fight magic. That's not to say the other episodes were poor because they didn't, but it makes this one stand out. Vegeta vs Shadow was too comedy focused. Goku vs Superman 2 was incredibly short and lacked the same feeling of sheer speed. Kirby vs Boo was close but not quite there. Roshi vs Jiraiya fittingly felt closer to an early Dragon Ball and Naruto fight as opposed to a modern day one, which makes sense for the characters. Hercule vs Dan, you wouldn't expect it. 18 vs Cat was a thing, and while Beerus's and Broly's episodes do come closer, they don't really capture it for me. Broly vs Hulk had the destruction of a Dragon Ball Z fight but lacked the impact, while Beerus vs Galaxy had the impact and destruction but didn't have the amount of pure fighting back and forth where they're just throwing regular attacks. Goku vs Superman for me hits that sweet spot. For every moment the characters bust out a specific technique or move, there's a moment where they just go ham on each other. They're not using special moves every time, there are times they're just throwing punches and kicks at supersonic speeds. It doesn't just sell the speed and skill of Goku, but the raw brute power of Superman. When you watch this fight, you feel the impact of every major blow Superman lands, another case of character animation like with All Might vs Might Guy. Goku's big moments come from his key attacks and techniques, while Superman's come from his raw power. It's a dynamic that works just as well as their banter, which is very fun and entertaining, and the voice acting is great. As the fight goes on, watching Goku ascend to higher forms bit by bit not only feels perfectly Dragon Ball, but also makes it incredibly fun to watch. Super Saiyan 2 is the only transformation that doesn't feel super impactful in the fight. Well, and Kaioken, but that had funny Team 4 star line. Goku catching Superman's punch in Super Saiyan, Goku screaming into Super Saiyan 3 then punching Superman out of nowhere, and that final transformation where the entire arena warps and changes, and everything reaches Omega level oh shit. The fight manages to show very little bias towards either character, while giving moments for both of them to express their personality that feel natural. Goku refuses to win via his opponent being handicapped, and Superman is genuinely thankful for this. Superman only escalates the fight as Goku does. He responds to what Goku does instead of pushing things himself, because one of his hallmarks is always holding back. He only stops holding back as Goku stops. And somehow this episode manages to make Superman flying off into the distance give me chills. The delivery, the line, the swelling music, and the moment you realize what he's doing, it's great. And they convey Superman's speed so well by just having him explode into the distance. Flash vs. Sonic was great, but even it did not convey the character's speed as well as this episode conveys Superman's. Flash and Sonic, sure, they can be faster than Superman, but between the animations, Superman feels faster in this scene than either Flash or their opponents. Then there's the ending, where everything comes to what is, in my opinion, one of the most cinematic moments in Death Battle history. There is so much build-up. Goku absorbing energy while Superman's sun dips, and then Goku fires off the biggest Kamehameha he can, and Superman flies through it. There's something undeniably epic about Superman flying straight through a Kamehameha and slamming Goku into the core of a planet. And then, boom, the planet explodes in what is the most impactful destructive moment in the series. And Superman doesn't come out just fine or looking as if all he did was stop some villain of the week. That final blow from Goku, that Dragon Fist, it knocked him out. And then, he opens his eyes, which is perfectly Superman. The character who, when you think all is lost, will always open his eyes and keep fighting. That is Superman. And when he opens his eyes, sure, he's not going back into the fight, but he survived. And that's that. The conclusion, meanwhile, it's not great number-wise, but the detail put in is incredible. The conclusion is almost as long as each character's individual analysis. They put so much time into explaining the character's strength, speed, durability in detail, and so much effort is shown here that it's almost excusable that the numbers are bad. And the ending of it is so much better than Goku vs. Superman 2. They're both about Superman and Goku's characters. One will always push limits, the other has no limits. But for some reason, in the first one, it feels so much more natural. It feels like a footnote to end the episode on. A little moment where they just express the difference in what the characters stand for, as opposed to just sounding like a cop-out reason. Goku vs. Superman is incredible, guys, and I don't know how else to put it. Everything works in such a way that all of its flaws, they vanish in the grand scheme of things. This episode doesn't just make itself out to be something special, it is something special. It's an episode with a fuck ton of polish, love, care, and time put into it. You cannot slap this episode into the middle of any random season and expect it to blend in. This is the episode where, binging everything, you would know that it was the finale. If we were to move to another timeline, where the finales are different, I doubt anyone would think otherwise for the others. If you swap Pokemon vs Digimon with Goku vs Superman 2, Deadpool vs Pinkie Pie with Hulk vs Doomsday, Sephiroth vs Virgil with Power Rangers vs Voltron, Thanos vs Darkseid with Mario vs Sonic 2, All Might vs Might Guy with Dracula vs Ganondorf, or Hulk vs Broly with Obi-Wan vs Kakashi, sure, they might not all be as grand or big as what we did get, but in a timeline where that's what we had, nobody would bat an eye really. But if you tried swapping Goku vs Superman with Link vs Cloud, or Thor vs Raiden, or Eggman vs Wily, if you tried to jam it into the middle of any of the 7 seasons we have, it would be clear something isn't right. Goku vs Superman is more than just an episode. It is a true season finale. One that makes it clear that it's not a throwaway episode. It's not just another DC fight. It's not just a highly requested episode. It's a labor of love, with more effort put into it than almost any other episode in the series' history. Goku vs Superman didn't need to destroy the solar system, or cause a supernova, or fucking annihilate a galaxy or the fourth wall, to alone feel more impactful and grand than every episode that did that. And that is why it is my favorite finale in Death Battle history. And that was my video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you're not too angry about certain things, especially where I placed Thanos vs Darkseid. It's my opinion, and I understand some people love Thanos vs Darkseid, so I get that you're going to be annoyed by that, but it's just my opinion, alright? And it's fair to have a different one. There's nothing wrong with having different opinions, especially on a place like the internet, where millions of people can get together and talk about what they like. That's it for this video. Please go check out Biffweeds, as I said earlier, and I hope you have a great day.